3 terrifying first-day on-the-job horror stories. Sinister encounters that expose hidden dangers. Jessica stood at the entrance of the abandoned hospital, a hulking silhouette against the dim skyline. In her mind, it loomed like a monster, a fortress of despair wrapped in whispers and shadows. She had always heard the stories, the screams that echoed through the dark, the patients who vanished without a trace but hoping for a better future. She had chosen to face the night as a security guard. Her heart raced as she pushed open the rusted doors, a chill snapping at her spine. The moment she crossed the threshold, the air thickened. The fluorescent lights flickered above her, buzzing like angry bees, casting strange shadows that danced along the peeling walls. Leaning into the initial excitement, Jessica took a deep breath, but the stale air tasted tainted, a bitter reminder of decay and neglect. In those first hours, she clung to her family's stories of resilience and the town's unborn hope for revival. Yet as the clock struck midnight, that hope began to slip. Strange symbols, jagged and familiar, were etched into the walls, remnants of a pain she couldn't quite understand. Suddenly, a rustle echoed from somewhere beyond the mop of darkness. Her heart jumped, pumping adrenaline through her veins. It was just a rat? Or was it? Shadows flickered in the edges of her vision, skittering away each time she turned her head. It was as if the hospital itself was alive, aware of her every movement. The radio crackled to life, static bursting to reveal incoherent whispers that curled her stomach. Help! Experiments! Trapped! Panic settled in her gut as foreboding stories of the hospital's malevolent past filled her mind. Before she could compose herself, the lights went out. An oppressive darkness swallowed the hospital whole, leaving only the sound of her rapid breathing. Fear clawed at her throat, and she stumbled forward, her feet unsure on the familiar ground. Each step deepened her sense of dread, twisting the hallways into a labyrinth of horrors. And then, she heard it, the unmistakable echo of footsteps behind her. Quick, erratic, like the pounding drum of her heart. There was something in the shadows, something following her. Her pulse quickened, and as she spun around, a fleeting figure slipped into the darkness. "Remember me?" it whispered, voice lingering like bitter smoke in the air. The words sent chills racing down her spine, dragging memories from the depths of her mind. She recalled her mother's voice, warning her about the experiments done in this very building. Those nightmares were dismissed as mere folklore, but here and now, they struck her as possibility. Frantically, Jessica grabbed her radio, desperately trying to contact the police. But each call was met with scoffs and disbelief, authority figures too entrenched in their pride to take her seriously. "You're imagining things," they insisted, dismissing her family history of mental illness, as if she were the one cursed. Left feeling utterly alone, she felt her grip on reality further erode. The shadows whispered more and more now, familiar yet twisted tales tugging at her mind. Just when hope flickered, a deep rumble trembled through the ground, shaking her to her core. The walls seemed to fold in around her, distorting her vision. Alone and terrified, Jessica found herself trapped in the heart of secrets. The weight of her family's past lay thick in the air. Who could she trust? She had come in seeking answers, but now she wondered if she would become another lost soul, swallowed by the darkness of the hospital's haunting legacy. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jessica's breath caught in her throat as a low growl emanated from the depths of the hallway. With every fiber of her being, she pushed forward, her only goal to escape. But every turn led her deeper into a maze of anguish and despair. Shadows pressed in, tugging at her sanity, holding secrets that demanded to be unearthed. As she took one step deeper into the chilling blackness, dread gripped her chest hard, not just for her own fate, but for the haunting echoes lying in wait. Would she find the truth, or become part of the darkness herself? Jessica stumbled through the inky blackness, her pulse racing. Each heartbeat echoed like a drum in the silence, the air thick with a sense of impending doom. The growling morphed into a throaty whisper, unsettling and agonized, as if the very walls were crying out in torment. She had to keep moving, but where to? The maze of the hospital twisted, unfamiliar shadows taunting her with memories best left buried. She pressed her back against the cold, damp wall, seeking a moment of clarity. The flickering lights above made the darkness feel alive, pulsating with a malevolent will. "Keep going," she muttered under her breath. "Just keep going." The weight of despair dug into her bones, but Jessica forced herself to take another shaky step forward. Suddenly, her foot caught on something. She stumbled, arms flailing to regain her balance. When she looked down, she froze. It was a small, rusted badge stained with dark, dried splotches. With trembling hands, she flipped it over. "Dr. Hayes," it read, a name that rumbled through her mind like thunder. The doctor was notorious in the town she grew up in. A shadowy figure whispered about in hushed tones. The experiments, the disappearances. Jessica felt bile rise in her throat. This had to be a joke. She took a step back, her mind racing through all the horror stories she had heard as a child. She had brushed them off as urban legends. But now the reality clawed at her sanity. Panic surged as she heard something, the sound of flesh dragging against the floor. It was low and guttural, getting closer. A shiver traveled down her spine. She turned, her breath hitching in her throat. In the dim emergency light, she saw it, a figure hunched and trembling, wrapped in a hospital gown ripped to shreds. Its hair hung like weeds over its face, an indistinct shape bending unnaturally. Shock filled Jessica's veins with ice. "Help me!" The raspy voice sent chills through the air, a cry mixed with genuine desperation. They took my eyes." She wanted to run, but something tethered her in place. "What happened? What do you need?" The question slipped out, a lifeline thrown into the abyss. "They're still down here," the figure wheezed, swaying, blood dripping from the bandaged remnants of its eyes. "They won't let me leave." Fear turned to horror as the reality of its words sank in. Jessica's mind raced. She wasn't alone, and what lurked within this endless night was far worse than anything she'd imagined. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices. "Join us, help us break the cycle." Jessica stumbled back, barely catching herself. The shadows swirled, twisting grotesque shapes that taunted her. "No," she cried, but her voice was drowned out, swallowed whole by the sinister rhythm of the hospital's despair. She turned to escape, nearly colliding with another figure, this one standing upright, eyes glimmering eerily in the dark. It smirked, revealing teeth stained and broken. Jessica's heart pounded in her chest like a war drum. "You think you can escape? There's no way out," it taunted, voice smooth yet dripping with malice. Fighting the panic clawing at her throat, she took off in the opposite direction, dread spurring her forward as the walls seemed to close in on her. Each door she passed felt like a portal to another nightmare. But the voices wouldn't stop. They whispered her name, each syllable like a shuddering breath against her ear. Jessica dove into a nearby room, heart hammering. She slammed the door behind her, gasping for breath, the dim light weak against the encroaching shadows. But the overwhelming darkness felt alive, pulsating, as if it were waiting for her to make the next move. "Help, help," came the voice from behind the door. This time it was layered, a chorus of tortured souls begging for release. The weight of their desperation pressed against her, threatening to draw her in, like quicksand. Could she really just leave? The echoes twisted in her mind. This was no ordinary hospital, but a trap, an unending nightmare surrounding her. But she could feel it in her bones. Answers lay ahead, wrapped in bloodied secrets. Was there still a way out, or had she become another part of this story? With resolve stiffening her spine, Jessica reached for the doorknob, breathing in determination. She would face whatever lay beyond. But as she turned it slowly, a new sound filled the air. something that silenced the whispers, a deep, mechanical clanking. The sound came closer, piercing through the shadows as the unmistakable rumble of a door being unlatched echoed through the hospital. What or who was about to enter? Jessica's breath caught in her throat, stuck between dread and anticipation. The clanking stopped, leaving an eerie silence that settled over the room like a shroud. A chill swept through her body, her skin prickling under the weight of unspoken threats. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a narrow shaft of light that cut through the darkness. Squinting, Jessica could barely make out the silhouette on the other side, a figure, unnaturally still, shrouded in the shadows. It was too tall, too thin, the kind of shape that sends an involuntary shiver racing down your spine. "Let me in," it rasped, voice cracking like ice on a frozen lake. "Who are you?" Jessica managed to ask, her voice trembling. "I'm just like you," it said, stepping into the light. The face was gaunt, with hollowed cheeks and sunken eyes that seemed to absorb the dimness around them. "Trapped in this nightmare. Let me help you." Help. The word echoed painfully in her mind. It was a lie, wasn't it? A trick, designed to pull her back toward the depths of this hellish hospital. But could she really refuse? Guilt twisted within her. The souls outside her door were still crying out, murmuring helplessly. "Why should I trust you?" She spat, heart racing. "Because you don't have a choice." His lips twisted into a haunting smile, revealing teeth so jagged they looked like bones. "If you want to leave, you must know the truth." Jessica barely had time to process his words before another noise surged from somewhere deeper in the hospital, a low growl, like the sound of something monstrous awakening. It rumbled through the walls, shaking the air around her. Instinctively, she took a step back, fear igniting in her chest. "What are they?" she gasped, glancing between the figure and the dark hallway beyond. "They are the damned," he replied, voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Those who have become part of this place. They'll consume you, body and soul, unless you embrace them." The thought of being enveloped by whatever horrors lurked nearby made her stomach churn. How could he suggest such a thing? Behind the figure, shadows flickered, swirling ominously as though alive. "No, I want tea," she said, voice wavering. "I want tea, become one of them. Then you'll never escape," he warned, a cold grin splitting his gaunt face. "Time is running out, Jessica." At the sound of her name, she felt her insides twist. How could he possibly know her? The growl intensified, echoing against the walls like a warning siren. The shadows shifted again, shadows morphing into figures creeping closer. "You have to decide," he urged. "Trust me or face the darkness." Clenching her fists, she weighed her options, the unknown with a monster, or the certainty of whatever awaited behind her. The cries outside were growing louder, more desperate, and she could feel the pull of their anguish like a physical force. "Help," came the chorus again, echoing off every surface, their voices binding her to this moment. Suddenly, Jessica understood. It wasn't just about escaping the building. It was about unraveling the horror that had festered inside. But could she gamble her safety on a stranger? "All right," she breathed, reluctant yet resolute. "Show me what I need to do." As the figure stepped back, an inviting arm gesture towards the waiting darkness, something uncoiled in her gut, a mix of fear and determination. This was it, her choice made, swallowing the dread like a bitter pill. But just as she crossed the threshold into the dark expanse, she heard a deafening crash behind her, the door slamming shut, locking her fate alongside the creatures that stirred in the abyss. The panic and despair morphed into an ugly, twisted exhilaration. "Now you're one of us," the figure said, his smile growing wider, showing more teeth. Was this the truth she sought, or merely another layer of the very nightmare she was trying to escape? As the shadows gathered, closing in around her, Jessica felt the stirrings of something deep within her, a revelation yet to unfold, and as the weight of uncertain choices pressed down on her, the faintest glimmer of hope flickered on the horizon just out of reach. The darkness wrapped itself around Jessica like a suffocating blanket. Every step deeper into the abyss sent tremors of dread through her body, swallowing the dim light of the corridor she had thought she was leaving behind. The air grew thick, heavy with the stench of decay and despair. She could hardly breathe. The thin figure motioned ahead, and she followed, her heart pounding. "You'll understand soon," it said, its voice echoing with a grotesque melody that danced on the edges of her sanity. Shadows writhed around them, forming grotesque shapes that twisted in ways that defied nature. The walls of the hospital seemed to pulse, alive with whispers, gnawing at her resolve. "Where are we going?" Jessica asked, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "We're going to meet the others. They're waiting for you." Its smile widened, a gaping maw that seemed eager to devour her whole. A series of thuds reverberated in the distance, growing closer. Something was out there, something ancient and hungry. Jessica's instincts screamed at her to turn back, but every step pushed her further into the impossible choice she had made. "Is it the damned you mentioned?" she whispered, regretting the words as soon as they left her lips. "They're more than that," the figure replied, its eyes sparkling with something that looked disturbingly like delight. "They are a family suffering together, and now you'll be one of them." Suddenly, the growls grew loud enough to vibrate the floor beneath her feet. Jessica stumbled, glancing around. The shadows thickened, pressing in as if the very darkness conspired against her. A figure broke through the shadows, too close for comfort. It had no face, only a gaping hole where its mouth should be, the raspy noises spilling forth like dry leaves in a windstorm. "No!" Jessica recoiled, panic rising like bile in her throat. She whipped around, searching for a way out. "Stay with us," the gaunt figure implored, its voice weaving through her panic like a sinister lullaby. "Embrace them. Embrace your fate. Never," she shouted, pushing against the convincing grip of terror that coaxed her to join the embrace of the damned. She darted down the hallway, the pulse of growls morphing into a symphony of agony and despair that clawed at her psyche. The corridor opened up into a vast chamber, filled with an oppressive darkness. Flickering lights illuminated a collection of bodies, some alive, some not, all trapped in twisted expressions of horror. Their eyes followed her, begging, pleading, filled with an understanding of the helplessness of her plight. She could barely move, fear paralyzing her as she recognized a familiar face. Jessica's heart sank. It was Dr. Mason, her former boss. "Help us, Jessica," he whispered, words barely escaping the confines of his twisted lips. "You need to let go or you will suffer like us." Jessica's breath hitched. "But how? I don't understand. What do you want from me?" He shook his head, an agonizing smile cracking across his face. "You must accept the truth, embrace the horror. Only then can you be free." The walls shuddered, the air grew colder, and shadows lunged forward. The damned beckoned her, their hands clawing at her skin, pulling her closer to the dark heart of the chamber. The growls intensified, merging into a cacophony of sorrow that threatened to crush her, demanding, pleading, and accusing. Suddenly, an eruption of sound pierced the darkness, a scream, jagged and raw, sliced through her thoughts. It wasn't from the damned. It felt personal. It was her own voice, echoing back at her from somewhere deep inside. "Choose, Jessica. Will you fight for your escape or surrender to the darkness?" Driven by a surge of desperation, she lashed out against the shadows with every ounce of strength she had left. The figure that had led her here watched, eyes gleaming with malice and uncertainty, as if sensing the dramatic shift in her will. But as she pushed back the darkness, an unexpected grasp wrapped tightly around her ankle, yanking her to the ground. Time paused as the world around her blurred, enveloped by the rising tide of shadows. Help begged the shadow that had her, its voice the embodiment of all her fears. And just then, she understood. The truth wasn't a promise of safety. It was the price of admission to the horrors that awaited. But could she truly face the darkness alone? With her heart racing, she took a deep breath and prepared to stand her ground. But would her inner strength be enough to break free? Or was she already too entangled in the web of despair? The shadows had her, a cold weight anchoring her to the ground. Panic exploded inside Jessica like a firework gone wild. She tugged at her leg, But the grip only tightened, the cold fingers of darkness wrapping around her tightly, trying to pull her into the depths of despair. "Let me go," she gasped, with every ounce of defiance she could muster. The damned reached for her, their gnarled fingers stretching out with a desperate hunger. The faces in the flickering lights were filled with uncertainty and fear, eyes pleading mingled with an insatiable desire for her acceptance. She was fighting for her life against a force that seemed almost sentient, like it fed off her terror. The figure that had led her here stood back, watching with twisted excitement as if relishing her struggle. "Let her go." A voice suddenly erupted from within the chamber, hoarse yet commanding. Jessica turned, breath catching in her throat. It was Dr. Mason, standing tall with an energy that defied his current state. "You won't be free until you let her go." His gaze bore into the shadow that clung to her ankle, solidifying the strength of her resolve. "Dr. Mason, how?" she cried, confusion swirling inside her like a storm. He took a step forward, the shadows writhing back from his presence as if pushed by an unseen force. "You're the key," he said urgently, "but you must face your fear. They're feeding on it, sweetening it like a candied poison. Your courage can break their chains." His words ignited something within her, a flicker of hope amid the engulfing despair. Jessica felt her heart pound again, an insistent reminder of her living flesh, a tether to the world above. "Fear," she shouted, channeling every ounce of strength. "You will not control me. I choose to fight." Energy flowed through her. It surged like electricity, lighting the corners of the chamber as she drew breath and pushed. The grip on her ankle loosened momentarily, and in that instant, she flung herself forward, tearing free from the shadows. But as she stumbled to her feet, the darkness retaliated. Shadows ebbed and flowed, a tidal wave of despair crashing against her, sending her tumbling back. The piercing growls melded into a horrific symphony, an angry chorus demanding her submission. "No," she screamed against the rising tide. "I won't be another victim." Jessica scrambled for the flickering lights, the faces of the damned still twisted in despair. But for the first time, she could see them clearly. They weren't just suffering. They were trapped. The realization struck her. They weren't just lost souls. They were extensions of her own fears, embodiments of every wrong turn she had ever taken. To escape, she had to confront them all. "Listen to me," she yelled to the faces around her. "We can escape this together. We must fight." Some faces flickered with the slightest hint of hope, while others remained resolute in their sorrow, resentful of her escape. But Jessica couldn't let their defeat drag her down. Gritting her teeth, she focused on the pulse of courage inside her, her own heartbeat resonating with a rhythm of rebellion. She started to chant, "We are more than our fears. We are stronger together." Over and over, the words echoed back, amplifying the power within her. The growls faded, replaced by a cacophony of confusion. Then, the shadows began to recoil, the grasping figures retreating as if stung. But just as the darkness drew back, a hideous laughter erupted from the one figure still standing near her, eyes wide and insane. Its smile morphed, sharper, teeth glistening in the dim light. "You think you can escape? You think you can win? You're already ours." Jessica's hope faltered. Fear returned like a cold tide, crashing over her renewed resolve. The chamber shook, and she stumbled back, watching in horror as the shadows converged once more. With her heart racing and tears streaming down her face, she realized this fight was far from over. If she was to survive, she needed more than will. She needed an ally, a strategy. But who or what would turn the tide in her favor? As the dark laughter echoed around her, one question loomed larger than the rest. Was there anyone left to save her? The chamber hummed with an unsettling energy, as if the walls themselves were alive, breathing in sync with the shadows. Jessica stood at the epicenter of fear, her heart hammering, a desperate rhythm against the encroaching darkness. The laughter echoed, scattering her thoughts. Each hysterical cackle was laced with promise, a thick fog of dread enveloping her. "Do you see?" the figure taunted, lips curling. "You are trapped in your own nightmare. just like all of them. It gestured broadly, indicating the faces twisted with sorrow. Jessica felt their gaze pierce through her, a coalition of despair clinging to her like a shroud. She blinked back tears, heart racing. "No, I am more than this," she cried, clenching her fists. Every inch of her screamed to flee, but this was no time for retreat. She rallied her courage, dug deep into the resourcefulness within her soul. The appeal to unity had sparked something, however faint. "Look," she shouted, gesturing wildly at the damned souls surrounding her. "You are not just shadows. You were real. We fought against this darkness before." "Fought?" A voice rasped from the left. One of the faces moved closer. "When did we ever win? We are echoes, mere memories trapped by the very fear you speak of." A stare filled with such void, such resignation that Jessica felt a chill wrap around her spine. Another voice chimed in, filled with bitterness. "Leave while you still can, girl. You'll only end up like us." The laughter erupted again, roiling like thunder among the patches of darkness. As the figure stepped closer, the shadows like a cloak wrapping tighter. "Why would your bravery matter? It's futile. You have no true strength here." A pulse of energy flared deep inside her. She could feel the air stifling her words, but she wouldn't relent. "I'm not going to live in fear anymore. If we're together, we can break these chains." Her voice rang out defiantly, filling the void where despair once lingered. Jessica searched their faces, desperate for allies in the fight. "If you can remember who you were, you can break free," she urged, channeling all her strength. "Remember joy, love, life. Hold on to that. Feel it. We are more than this darkness." Some faces flickered, shadows of recognition passing across their features like fleeting moments of sunlight. A whisper of defiance ignited in the corners of the chamber, rippling beneath the weight of despair. "Remember," she repeated, more softly now, as if coaxing a fragile flame back to life. "Remember the laughter. Remember those who love you. It's time to fight back." The shadows creaked and shrieked in protest. The figure's laughter turned feral. "What do you think you're doing? You're only prolonging the inevitable. Despair has rooted in too deep." Jessica's knees weakened as the darkness lashed out, but she pushed against it, standing tall. "No, I will not give up. I am alive and I choose to fight." Suddenly, a ripple cascaded through the crowd of lost souls. One of the figures, an old woman with kind eyes, took a step forward, her voice barely a whisper, yet somehow cutting through the chaos. "I remember," she began. "I have love. I have family waiting for me." Jessica's heart surged with hope at the flicker of resistance. Yes, yes. She could feel strength pulsing back, spreading through those gathered in the dark. Other faces began to murmur, embers of hope igniting into tiny flames. But the figure lurking near her snarled, "This is your last chance, girl. Join us willingly, and we may spare you the worst. Otherwise watch me," she replied, feeling the unity around her reinforcing her statement. "We will break free together or not at all." As she shouted those words, a deafening roar filled the air, a scream that echoed off the walls like a horrific tsunami. The chamber trembled, shaking as shadows spiraled into chaos, contracting and expanding like a living beast, pushing back against their collective defiance. Dark hands clawed at her, grasping for her once more. "You think this is the end? You only delay your fate," the evil figure shrieked amidst a cacophony of rage. Jessica's resolve turned into steely determination. She took a step forward, encircled by the lost souls who now burned with her resolve. Would they manage to break the hold of darkness together, or would despair reign once more? As the shadows converged, she braced for impact, unsure if this was the moment salvation would come, or if they would all be consumed. But deep within her, a question rang loud. Who would stand with her when the fight reached its peak? The chaos roared around Jessica, shadows writhing like snakes. The darkness threatened to swallow her, but an electric spark surged through her veins. She could feel the spirits beside her intensifying their strength, as if her voice was a rallying call that echoed off the damp stone walls. Together, she shouted, a battle cry erupting from her throat. We are more than just whispers. We are memories woven into existence. Every word struck the air like a lightning bolt. The apparitions began to shift, some closing their eyes in concentration, others tilting their heads upward as if trying to grasp something long forgotten. The laughter that had filled the chamber faltered, uncertainty creeping in. Do you really think the figure sneered, now visibly shaken? It staggered back for a heartbeat, swallowed by the confusion. But then it roared, silence. You cannot escape what you are. Let them remember. Jessica pushed forward, fueled by a surge of adrenaline. Let them feel. A wave of energy ebbed and flowed among the crowd. The chamber's walls shuddered, the air vibrating as if reality itself was splitting apart. Jessica saw glimmers of light flicker in the darkest corners, bright sparks kindling from the once hopeless souls. They remembered, but in the eye of this storm, the figure rallied its fury. You will pay for your insolence. It screeched, shadows coiling around it, twisting into thick tendrils ready to strike. A terrified whisper emerged from the old woman. Our connections are our shields, love is our weapon, fight. Jessica felt fire ignite in her heart. Yes. Hold on to the fragments, she urged. Fight for what you love. Suddenly, a human hand reached for hers across the separation of despair. It was a young man, eyes gleaming with defiance. I'm here. I remember what I fought for. As their fingers interlocked, a surge shot through the chamber. Light danced around them, cascading like falling stars. More joined in, hands reaching out, forming a chain against the terror as if they were rediscovering a buried treasure. Yet the shadows responded violently. Writhing masses lunged at them, snapping like ravenous beasts, clawing with an insatiable hunger. You'll never break free. Your chains will only tighten. The figure hissed, venom dripping from its tone. No, Jessica screamed, pushing against the shadows, feeling the icy grasp of despair clutching at her ankles. We refuse. We will rise. The connection seemed to swell, like a tidal wave against a breaking dam. Faces contorted with pain and rage transformed into embers of courage. Together, they amplified their collective memories, creating a roar that clashed with darkness, surging and crashing like stormy seas. But the figure, maddened by desperation, began to scream in fury, a sound that tore through the very fabric of reality. As its shadows converged, time felt suspended, a moment that teetered on the precipice between flame and oblivion. Then, all at once, a blinding white light burst forth, a shockwave that rippled through the air. Jessica's heart raced as everything around her shimmered, the shadows howling in anguish, recoiling against the brilliance that fought to cleanse the darkness. And then, just as abruptly as it began, silence fell. The light faded, and with it, the figure vanished into wisps of smoke, leaving Jessie breathless. She gasped, veins still pulsing with adrenaline. The souls around her blinked, bewildered, their eyes slowly adjusting to hope. But dread loomed, thick and heavy, as a chilling sensation crept back in. This icing over Jessica whispered, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. She took a shaky breath. Was it truly done? What emerged from the shadows, lurking just beyond her vision? What awaited them in the stifling darkness? The echoes of a sinister voice whispered in her ear, taunting. You only awaken something deeper. What price would they pay for awakening the hidden horrors lying in wait? A pulse of silence filled the air, pregnant with unshed dread. Jessica stood, rooted to the spot, her heartbeat thudding loudly in her ears. Throat tight, she tried to steady her breathing. Around her, the group of spirits shimmered like delicate embers, their faces a mixture of confusion and cautious hope. But darkness clung to the edges, teasing and beckoning. What now? A voice quivered from the group. A woman, her features blurry with memory, stepped forward, eyes glistening with desperation. What did we unleash? Jessica opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The echo of the figure's haunting proclamation lingered. You only awaken something deeper. The words wrapped around her like a snake, squeezing tighter. She turned her head sharply, scanning the chamber's shadowy corners. But nothing appeared yet. The chill crawled up her spine, a lurking dread that almost felt alive. "We need to stick together," Jessica shouted, trying to rekindle the fire that had sparked within them moments ago. "If we remain united, we can face whatever comes next." But inside, her mind twisted. Would they all be swallowed by the shadows? Suddenly, a horrible wail rose in the distance, piercing through the silence. It echoed like a cry for help, raw and desperate, sending shockwaves down Jessica's spine. The spirits flinched, their expressions shifting from hope to horror. "Do you hear that?" A man with wild eyes peered into the dark. "What if it's a trap?" "No." Jessica fought to keep her voice steady. "Could be more souls. We cannot abandon them. We must go." But as she led them toward the source of the cry, the air thickened, suffocating. She felt their hesitation, a reluctance weighing heavily on their egress. The darkness continued to swell, surrounding them like a tidal wave. Suddenly, figures began to emerge from the shadows. Sinister shapes twisted and turned, their forms indistinct yet undeniably humanoid, eyes glowing like distant stars in a pitch-black night. They swirled ominously, edging closer, feeding off the fear radiating from the resurrected spirits. "Jessica!" A voice cried as a figure with long hair broke away from the group. It was the young man from before, his face now pale, eyes wide with terror. "We can't just walk into that." A frenzied heartbeat quickened in her chest as the spirits began to whisper among themselves, voices climbing in pitch, panic igniting in the room. The cries grew louder, jangling her nerves. Tears slipped down the cheeks of a spirit nearby, mixing sadness with terror. "Look," Jessica gasped, pointing as one spirit reached out a trembling hand. "They want to come through." The shadowy figures howled, a sickening cacophony. The spirits recoiled, driven by a primal fear. Jessica clenched her fists. There was no turning back. She surged forward, heart racing with a reckless determination. "If they want out, we will help them." But as she stepped closer, an overwhelming darkness clawed at her, deep and bitter. It felt like being buried alive, the weight of countless memories pressing down. She closed her eyes, refusing to submit to despair. This time, she thought of love, the memories they fought for, the reasons they had to fight, the connections that made them whole. Together, she rallied, echoing her battle cry again. But her voice cracked, trembling against the shadows. The air vibrated ominously as the figures shifted, pulsating like a living heartbeat. Then, without warning, the shadows surged forward, crashing into the spirits with an enraged fury. A horrid sound erupted as they intertwined, a clash of reality and nightmare, and Jessica felt the ground quake beneath her feet. "No!" she screamed, every fiber of her being wanting to retreat. But something inside her roared in defiance. The twisted shadow figures shrieked, colliding with the burgeoning light, their shadows igniting a battle of pure despair against the hope that flickered. Just then, a terrible laugh echoed, slashing through the chaos. "You think this light will save you? You are but sparks against the abyss." Jessica trembled, a sense of helplessness clawing at her. But then she remembered the young man, the souls, the fleeting warmth of their connections. Could her voice truly pierce through their darkness? With whatever strength she had left, she summoned her courage and shouted, "Fight! Fight for each other! Fight for your memories!" But with every breath, the shadows threatened to overwhelm them. And as the laughter twisted into a shriek, she realized, what if this had all been a trap? What if the battle had just begun? The laughter grew louder, and Jessica's heart sank. Outside this chamber, what awaited them? A cold wave of dread washed over Jessica as the shadows roared, contorting and writhing like an army unleashed. She felt her willpower fading, a slow drip of hope being consumed by an ever-expanding void. The laughter echoed in her skull, a taunt, drowning out the howls of struggling spirits. Their faces twisted in terror, desperate pleas filling the air, an emotional hurricane of agony. "Stay close," Jessica shouted again, but her voice wavered under the weight of darkness. The spirits were being pulled backward, away from the burgeoning light she summoned. She reached out, grasping at the nearest spirit, her fingers grazing the cold surface of what used to be a warm body, a snapshot of a life now trapped between worlds. "You can't let them take you," she pleaded, feeling the cold pull of despair wrapping its tendrils around her ankles. The shadows coiled tighter, a creeping feeling of inevitability. Suddenly, a spirit burst forth from the chaos. It was the young man, eyes wild with fear and determination. "Look at them," he yelled, his voice trembling. "They aren't just shadows. They're memories twisted by pain, lost moments yearning for release." His words reverberated, creating a resonance that drew the attention of the other spirits. "What do we do?" Another voice broke through the cacophony, uncertainty hanging in the air like smoke. "Remember who you were," Jessica cried, desperation lacing her every word. "Remember what you loved. Pull it forward." She felt her heart race, igniting what remained of her courage. At her command, the spirits began to flicker, fading in and out like faulty lights. They reached toward the darkness, not with fear, but with a fierce yearning to reclaim their stolen identities. Jessica watched in awe as the coldness she felt began to recede, replaced by a flicker of warmth as their memories surged forward. The shadow figures hissed in outrage, snarling as they sensed the shift. "You can't escape your past. It'll consume you," they shrieked, but the crowd of spirits pressed closer together, forming a line of defiance against the encroaching nightmare. "It's them or us," Jessica shouted, heart pounding, adrenaline pushing her forward. She moved with them, a foot soldier in this desperate war against oblivion. "Fight back. Remember your happiness. Feel the love that kept you alive." The air thickened with emotion. Moments of laughter, love, and life wove a tapestry of light that pulsated against the darkness. The shadows shrieked, faces contorting in agony as they recoiled from the swarm of warmth, the resonance of life pushing back against their hunger. One by one, the spirits began to merge into the light, their edges blurring, faces transforming into ephemeral images of joy. Hope exploded like fireworks, bright and blinding, filling the chamber with a dance of light. The shadows faltered, flickering like a dying flame. But just as victory appeared possible, a deep growl rolled through the chamber, flooding the air with malevolence. "You think this is enough?" The mocking voice boomed again, dark and deep. "I'll show you real despair." With that proclamation, the wall of shadows surged forward, no longer mere figures but a monstrous black wave. 1,000 voices rising in a symphony of despair. Chanting it felt personal, targeted. Jessica's heart dropped as she felt a pushing force, pulling at her soul. "No," she gasped, feeling the unrelenting tide of shadows constrict around her. Suddenly, she glimpsed a swirling portal of light forming just ahead, a thin ribbon of escape visible in the weight of shadow. "There," she cried, pointing with urgency. "We have to reach it." But the malevolent laughter resumed, echoing through the earth, shaking its foundations. They had fought hard, but would it be enough to breach the veil? Together, they surged toward that portal, shadows clawing at their heels, each step feeling like a tug-of-war with lifetimes, hope flickering dangerously low. Yet as they ran, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling of a darker truth lying in wait. What if they weren't just fleeing the shadows, but running into something far worse? As they teetered on the threshold of the light, the darkness behind them rose higher, preparing to unleash its final fury. Would they emerge free, or would they step into a trap even deeper than the one they just escaped? Jessica's heart thundered as she sprinted towards the thin sliver of light, the only hope in a sea of darkness. Behind her, shadows twisted and swelled, a surging wave of despair clawing at her back. The air crackled with tension. Could they really escape? The spirits around her surged forward, their ethereal forms flickering with the pulse of fear and adrenaline. "Keep moving," she shouted, her voice trembling. The light grew brighter, a beckoning promise that seemed tantalizingly close yet endlessly far. The shadows lurked behind, hungry, their howls echoing like the death knell of old nightmares returning to claim their due. "Run!" the young man yelled, pulling her forward. The others followed his lead, the desperate energy of survival driving them. Jessica felt the warmth of the light wrapping around her like an embrace, giving her strength even as the bitter chill of despair pursued them. But just as they neared the threshold, an ear-splitting roar erupted from the depths. The ground trembled violently. "You're not leaving," it bellowed, its voice a throaty storm as shadows surged forward, monstrous in their fury. Jessica stumbled as the floor shook beneath them, but she caught herself, unwavering. Bracing against the tremors, she pushed forward, determination igniting within her chest. "We are leaving," she screamed, gripping the hands of the spirits beside her, an unbreakable chain of defiance. Bodies surged toward the light, one step, then another, each stride blocking out the terror clamoring for their retreat. Jessica's heart ached with the fire of hope. This was it. This was their moment. They just had to reach the light. An outstretched hand caught her wrist, holding her fast. It was the figure, grinning with a twisted smile that sent chills racing down her spine. "You'll regret this," it screeched, shadows morphing into spindly claws that reached out in unending darkness. "No," she shouted, a roar born of fire and willpower surging through her. "We won." Succumb. With strength fueled by collective memory and determination, she reached one final time for the fading light. A few steps away now, she could feel its warmth seeping into her soul. The spirits behind her rallied, confidence sparking between them, each remembering the beauty and worth of their existence. With an explosive show of unity, they launched themselves into the portal. The moment they crossed the threshold, the air shifted. A mash of memories, laughter, warmth that enveloped them, cascading in radiant, vibrant waves. Colors exploded around them, drenching the shadows in stark brilliance. Together, they embraced every memory that had once tied them to suffering, igniting it with unwavering love. A thunderous roar echoed behind them, a final cry of fury from the shadows, tremors shaking the very ground they had put behind them. But as the darkness clawed at its edges, it recoiled, the shadows dissolving against the light, shattering into fragments of long-buried memories never to return. Silence filled the air, a soothing balm after the cacophony of despair. Jessica opened her eyes, momentarily blinded by the brightness. Her lungs filled with fresh air, a scent of flowers in bloom, and suddenly, she was no longer surrounded by the ominous walls of the hospital. They stood in a lush field, sunshine washing over them like sweet music. The spirits blinked, bewildered, their forms shimmering like morning dew in sunlight. Jessica looked around, relief washing over her like a warm embrace. We made it?" One spirit whispered, eyes alight with disbelief. "Yes." Jessica beamed, laughter bubbling up from her throat. "We're free." Yet even in that joyous moment, doubts flickered at the edges of her mind. "But what happens now?" She mused aloud, glancing at the spirits, a new unity built on the strength of their harrowing experience. "Now," the young man said, his face bright with hope, "we live. We remember every precious moment taken from us, and we honor our freedom by healing and helping others." Jessica smiled, warming to the thought. Together, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky a canvas of oranges and pinks, the spirits gathered around her, smiles breaking through their once sorrowful faces. They were no longer just symbols of despair. They had become a family. And as she stepped forward, hand in hand with the souls she had saved, she knew this was only the beginning. Together, they would fight for every bit of life that awaited them, weaving a new story from the shadows of their past, rewriting their journeys with threads of hope and resilience. As they strolled into the vibrant sunset, the shadows remained, lurking just beyond in the corners of memory. But Jessica knew now. They wouldn't define her. This was her choice, her life, and it was beautiful. And like that, Jessica erupted with a joyous shout, beckoning the spirits to join her in their return to life. It would be a long journey, but she would never forget the strength of unity, the power of memories, or the darkness they had bravely faced. Now, as we wrap up this harrowing tale, remember, this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm, and flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. How do you think Jessica's journey will continue? And of course, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let us spread the light together.